Good afternoon and welcome to Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me live at MarketSite is Christian Magoon. He's the founder and CEO of Amplify ETFs. It's great to have you back in New York.
Thanks, Jill.
All right, so let's get right into this. Let's talk about IBUY, ticker IBUY, and online trends that you're seeing relative to traditional brick and mortar.
Yeah, so online retail continues its healthy growth. The U.S. Census Department just came out with its most recent retail numbers. Total U.S. retail sales were up 4% year over year. Online retail sales up a little over 10%. So we're seeing outsized growth online. Still, though, only 10% of all U.S. retail sales are done online. So there's a lot of ways to grow here. China, for example, is over 20% of their sales online. We're seeing interesting trends like voice-enabled devices. 20% of Google searches are now done via voice assistants. And Amazon is a leader, certainly, in turning that into e-commerce. Some of the other brands are doing that. Also seeing the emergence of not just brick, not just mortar, not just online, but omni-channel, where today, for example, there's a report out that said online retail shoppers, 75% of them prefer to return something not in the mail, but in store. So that bodes well for online retailers doing strategic things with brick and mortar, as well as brick and mortar starting to look at the online space and doing deals with those types of companies.
Are you seeing that reflective in the performance of IBUY?
Yeah. So looking at the performance last year, IBUY, the online retail ETF, was up about 50%. XRT, which is kind of the traditional spider retail ETF, was up just slightly for the year. This year, in the first quarter, online retail stocks in IBUY were up 10%. XRT was down about 1.7%. Still seeing that outperformance come into those companies. We think, again, it's because they're growing. Brick and mortar is trying to reinvent. Their market share is shrinking. But we've seen some interesting deals, like Yum Brands investing $200 million in Grubhub, for example, and really trying to get that kind of brick and mortar store into this food delivery ecosystem. And that was good for Grubhub stock, and we think it'll be good for Yum Brands too. So a lot of interesting developments in terms of strategic and M&A going on in the space.
Let's talk about another innovative product over Amplify ETFs, Block.
Yeah.
One of the first blockchain technology-based ETF to launch.
Yes.
And so let's talk about that as well. Technology, it's still strong, it's a place to be.
Yeah, I think it's early for blockchain, but we're starting to see some really interesting applications. Nasdaq is actually one of the leaders in implementing blockchain into their technology base. A lot of efficiencies there. Walmart is doing some interesting things with IBM on food safety. Used to take them about 6.5 days to track down a food safety issue versus their old network. In this new Food Safety Alliance blockchain that Walmart and IBM are a part of, it took them 2.3 seconds to track down some problematic food that they had to find out what farm did this actually come from. So we're seeing a lot of efficiencies there. We think companies that are leading in research, investment, development in this area, like a Nasdaq, are going to benefit and kind of distance themselves from peers. So we've seen some decent traction in that fund, about $170 million in the first 3 months, and thus far it's outperformed the S&P since it launched January 16th of this year.
I think it's really interesting because when people think of blockchain, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency comes into the equation, and you made an interesting point. You said Bitcoin needs blockchain, blockchain doesn't need Bitcoin, and I think that's really what sets it apart.
Yeah, so a lot of people confuse cryptocurrency with being blockchain, but blockchain is really the underlying technology, and the first kind of killer app is cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. There'll be many other types of apps, and I kind of use the analogy of think of internet technology. The first killer app was maybe a website or email, but all sorts of companies and business models developed. That's kind of where we are. We're about 20 years kind of behind where the internet technology was. So yeah, Bitcoin, it needs blockchain, but blockchain doesn't need Bitcoin, and I think that's a good point for investors to think about, not to necessarily watch cryptocurrency and determine what is that going to be kind of the future of blockchain. Many more use applications.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us
Thanks,
at
Jill.
MarketSite.
Good seeing you.
And traders, thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.